honored to have Felienne Hermans as a guest here. She is, in case you haven't picked up on it yet, Professor in Amsterdam. What's it, Vrije Universiteit?
Yeah, Vrije Universiteit.
Okay, I'm very bad with my Dutch. I'm sorry. Felienne published a paper last year that was a bit of a whack on the head for me, in the good way, because it made me realize things that were in plain sight all along, and that in hindsight, I think, yeah, I could have noticed that one earlier. And I've actually heard variants in other contexts of this, but I never connected the dots. So the title was A Case for Feminism and Programming Language Design. And if you do not know what feminism has to do with programming languages, you are in the right spots, because there is a connection. So I'm glad to have you here, Felienne.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, finally we managed. Take it away.
Will do. Hello everyone, my name is Felienne Hermans. I'm indeed a professor of computer science education at Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam. And in addition to my job as a university professor, I'm also a high school teacher 1 day a week. So 1 day a week I teach like tiny humans that are now, maybe they're not so tiny, the 16-year-olds are also bigger than me, but tinier than the people I teach in university. And indeed last year I published a paper called A Case for Feminism in Programming Language Design, and this was joint work with Ari Schlesinger, who's in Atlanta, Georgia. And maybe now you are like, what? Like, what does feminism have to do with programming languages, right? That makes no sense. So I understand that this is a bit of a weird combination. So I thought we started easy with a quiz. The is it or isn't it a programming languages quiz? This is a very easy quiz. I will show you a thing, and you as a group, you may vote whether or not it is a programming language. For bonus points, you may also shout what you are seeing. Let's start with a softball. What is this? Yes, so what programming language is it? Indeed, it is C. So now you may vote, is this a programming language? Just raise your hand if you think this is a programming language. Okay, so 100% you are in agreement, this is a programming language. So what is this? Does anyone know, like, what is it called, yeah?
So programming language, but with extra steps.
Yeah, so this is actually called UML, the Unified Modeling Language. And indeed, it is meant to describe stuff inside a programming language. Do you think this is a programming language, yes or no? Just raise your hand if you're like, yeah, this is a programming language. 4.5 hands. Okay, cool. What is this? This should be easy, right? Excel, yes. So formulas in spreadsheets, is that a programming language? Raise your hand if you're like, yes. Okay, 50%. And then a few people that are like, voting half points. Okay, what is this? Scratch, yes. So is this a programming language? 75%? Okay, this might be the toughest one to guess what it is. Does anyone know what this is?
Christian knows.
Knitting, yes, this is a knitting pattern. You can see it has rows and it has repetition, so you do something and then you do it a bunch of times. So is this a programming language? Oh, sorry. Is this a programming language? Raise your hand if you're... Really like peer pressure, so a few hands went up and then a bit more and a bit more. So maybe also 50%. Final one, what is this? HTML, yes, HTML. So is that a programming language? Raise your hand if you're like, yes, it's a programming language. 20%. Okay, so what we have now empirically sort of validated is that there's something that is programming languages-ness, right? So some things are more programming language and other things are less programming language. And we are somewhat in agreement, right? There were 0 and 100% votes, and there was also stuff in between. And I made a prediction that is usually correct if I give this talk, that UML is least a programming language and C is most a programming language, and the other stuff is in between. And this isn't even really stable over time. I am old enough to remember when Python was not a programming language. When I was a student, Python was a scripting language, which then was something very, very different. You had programming languages like C and scripting languages like PHP and Python for script kiddies, not serious people. So it's a bit interesting to think of what were you just doing, right? What were the tools you were using in your brain when you were deciding whether or not it was a programming language? And one thing that people often use is, can a machine execute it? Is it machine executable, right? This is a nice thing, I think, for dividing programming languages from not programming languages. And then this is good because Scratch and C are programming languages. And UML is not a programming language. So that fits our scale. But then HTML is a programming language. And somehow it is very important to computer scientists to say that HTML is not programming and that spreadsheet is not programming. So this is maybe helpful, but it's not enough. And of course, there's another thing that we very often use to decide if something is a programming language. What other tool do we use to decide? I mean, you were just doing the decision. Like there must have been something. So one other thing that people very often use is it Turing complete? So can it express all computation? And this has nice effects. Then HTML is not a programming language and Scratch and C are, but then probably this is also not what you want, because not also Magic the Gathering is a programming language because it's Turing complete. So, no, stop, this also cannot be correct. So apparently there isn't this real decision tree where we can say this is a programming language and this is not a programming language. And from that you can conclude that what is a programming language is something like a social construct, right? We decide what programming languages is, and as I said about Python and PHP, things can move into being a programming language, probably things also can fall out. So this whole what is a programming language isn't really so mathematical or so technical as we want to think. And then maybe you're all like, who cares, Felienne? Why are we talking about whether or not this is a programming language, right? But for me, this is not just an exercise in philosophy. It's like, oh, what is the meaning of a programming language? This is such a fun and interesting question to me. Like, this is not how it happens. I would have much rather not at all thought about this question, but somehow this question keeps jumping into my life if I don't ask about it. If we go back way in my research career, in 2010, this is when I was doing my PhD, and in my PhD work, I was working on spreadsheets. And I thought this was actually very interesting and fun, because spreadsheets are a way of programming, as far as I'm concerned, but they're very special as a means of programming, because normal people, by which I mean not computer scientists, aren't afraid of spreadsheets. And they're very afraid of all the other things, right? They're definitely afraid of Python. Even HTML is very intimidating to people. They think they can never do it. But then you see an accountant who's definitely not a programmer, and they have this 150-tab worksheet. It's like running an entire bank. It's like, oh, that's fun, right? So I thought, this is interesting. How come spreadsheets are not intimidating to people? And can we somehow make spreadsheets better? And I thought this was just a fantastic topic. I was very excited about it, giving talks like, oh, I work on spreadsheets. And then when I was encountering other academics that were also doing programming languages work, they were not very excited about my work. They were like, yeah, that's not real programming. I'm like, well, that's what makes it special, right? This is what makes it so interesting for me. But I try to convince people, I'm like, yes, but they are programming because it's like functional programming, because a formula doesn't have any side effects. I thought this is what programming people go crazy for, things that do not have side effects. I said, look, they don't even have side effects. Not impressive. I said, oh, this is reactive programming. When I was doing my PhD, this was very hot, reactive programming. No, people were still like, nah, that's not real programming. It's like, what makes something programming? And people said, Turing completeness. I was like, okay, oh, Turing completeness? I can do this. I made a Turing machine in spreadsheet formulas. Look, this is a Turing machine made with spreadsheet formulas. And I think it's also very beautiful because with conditional formatting, you see the head is moving over the tape. I think this is a very good visualization, much better than running it on the command line to show how a Turing machine works. I'm like, okay, now we're done, right? This is case closed. Look at this programming. But people were like, nah, it's not real programming. And after a while, it really lost like its fun, because every time when I went to a conference, and this was 4 years I was working on my PhD, never were people interested in what I had done, ever. Like, they were never interested in my findings. As soon as in any coffee chat, it would be like, oh, I work on spreadsheets, and it was this conversation. And after a few years, I was like, yeah, you know, I don't think I want to do this anymore. Not just spreadsheets, but just like academia. I am done with these people because apparently the things I care about, understanding why people like to use something, isn't in scope in programming languages. So then after I finished my PhD, this is also when I started to work in the high school. You can tell the story that then it makes me look really good. I'm like, oh, I want to give something back to society. I started to work in the high school. And that's a version of the truth. But the more honest version is I was just so done with them people. I thought maybe 12-year-olds will be nicer to me. Like I tried adults, it wasn't a big success. Let me try children, and it was a lot of fun. But then after a while I was teaching in a high school and I thought, oh, there are so many interesting research questions in programming education. Maybe I can research instead of programming language design, maybe I can research like education. And that was super fun, and I started to write papers about how to teach children about programming, and it turned out that there was a really, really nice community of other people that were much more diverse than people in programming languages that were also researching education. And they were like, hey, Felienne, welcome to our team. And not saying, what is spreadsheets? They were saying, yes, oh, we love what you're doing. And then I was like, oh, this is great. I'm so at home in this community. And then I lived happily ever after. No, of course not. No, because I can't help myself. I'm a programming languages person. I just really, really like making programming languages and thinking about the design of programming languages. So then in my research into programming education, I accidentally made a programming language because, you know, that's just my itch. And when I made this programming language, I had to go back to the programming languages community. I felt somehow that I wanted to share this work about designing this programming language, not just with the education people, but also with the PL people. This is my programming language, by the way, and what you can see that it is very cool about my programming language is you don't have to program in English. You can program in other languages. This is Hedy in Spanish. It's called Hedy, by the way. So when I was seeing this German code, I was immediately saying, oh, is that a real programming language? Can that be executed in German? But it was just pseudocode, so that was a bit sad. Hedy, however, can actually be executed. And we don't just support Spanish. We currently support 69 different natural languages. This is all open source, by the way. I do not speak 69 languages. I speak like 2.5. But the whole community around this programming language has helped me translate it. And we don't just have Latin languages like German or Spanish. We also have non-Latin languages, including Arabic, which is, this was like 6 months of my life to make it in Arabic. Oh, so much work. It was a lot of fun, but also a lot of work. And then this specific part, this part about making a programming language multilingual, that work was something I wanted to share in the programming languages community because it wasn't really about education. It was about what are the technical steps that you need to do to make a programming language in Arabic with different keywords and different grammatical constructs and of course everything like right to left and many other things. So I thought, I will try again. So I went to a conference called Splash. This is like the main conference in programming language design. For the people over 40 like me, that's the conference that used to be called UPSLA. It's like, what is Splash? It was UPSLA. So I went there. It's like, oh, hello everyone, I'm back. I made a programming language. I swear it's not spreadsheets. It is a real language with letters and a compiler, and you cannot hold anything against it. But of course, I was ready because I thought they're not going to take me very seriously. And what I was ready for is that people would say, why would you do this? Or this is what I was ready for. So I was already like, why? Well, it's very nice for people to use their own language. You might not understand if you're English, but it's actually very nice to do stuff in your own language. But this wasn't actually the number one question I was getting. The number one question I was getting at that conference when I was walking around was, why is that hard? Why is it hard to make an Arabic programming language? Because we can already make a language in English, and Arabic is the same, right? We already solved it for English. So why is it hard to also solve it for Arabic? It's a bit like this joke. Do you know this joke about a mathematician and his house is on fire? Oh, awesome. I can tell you a new joke. So if you're a non-mathematician, then your house is on fire, like, oh no, my house is on fire, tring, help, fire brigade, or you grab some water like you do something. But not a mathematician, no. A mathematician who wakes up in the middle of the night and notices that his house is on fire. It's like, oh, fire. Takes a box of matches, lights one, blows it out and says, ah, this is solvable, and goes back to sleep. This is the question, why is that hard, right? This is a solved problem. Of course, we can make programming languages in English. So just doing it in Arabic isn't going to really change the problem. So you're doing something easy. I was like, oh, I got this, right? I did 4 years of battling spreadsheets. You know why this is hard? It's super hard because Arabic has diacritics, like accents. They have a different word order. And do you know there isn't a language called Arabic? There's actually like 25 languages. Egyptians do not agree with Palestinians on what is Arabic. This makes it really very hard. Did you know they have different numerals? Like, I was so ready to explain why it was hard. But while I was doing this, I sort of felt my soul leave my body. Like I was like hovering over myself, like from the ceiling. I was like, Hermanns, what are you doing? Like, why are you in this conversation? Because just answering this question also means that I value this question. But in my heart, I was like, I don't care if this is difficult. It doesn't matter to me if it's difficult. Even if it would have been 5 minutes of work, which of course it wasn't, but even then, like what I care about is getting emails from people all over the world, sending me emails saying, we use your system, and just because it is in Persian or because it is in Arabic or in Spanish, it makes it so much easier for us to use this. That's what I care about making programming easier and more accessible. I don't care about this whole way of thinking. So then I went home and I was like, great, that was not a success, right? Again, I wasn't welcome. People were not excited about what I was doing, or if they were excited about it, they weren't excited about it for the same reasons that I'm excited about. Why don't I feel at home, right? Because initially when I was still doing my PhD, I could think, well, it's about me, right? I'm not doing the right things. Maybe I don't fit here. But now I was like, I'm old, right? I'm a full professor. I'm in my 40s. I'm like, I fucking belong here, right? I made a programming language. If I don't feel at home in a group of programming languages people, then maybe they are just all wrong and I'm right? I should belong here. So I just wanted to understand this feeling, like, why don't I feel at home? Why? Like, help. I have feelings. Now what do? I have feelings. I want to understand why I don't feel at home here. And then if you have a case of the feelings, there's sort of two things you can do. One is therapy, but then maybe this is the same in Germany. If you want to have therapy, like, Trink, can I have some therapy? Oh, we have a waiting list of 6 months. Oh, no, maybe not therapy. But the other thing you can do, well, you can also use some science. I thought, well, I'm a scientist. Maybe I can use some science to understand my own feelings. So how do I study feelings from the perspective of scientific knowledge? And then if you are a professor over 40 in a technical domain, you for all the people that are women, and if you also make it to that age, you will be added to WhatsApp groups that are like support groups of other female faculty in technical domains. It's just a thing that will happen. This also happened to me. And I was chatting with in some of those groups. I'm like, friends, help, I have feelings. I went to a conference and people were mean to me. Like, and some of them were like, Felienne, have you tried feminism? I was like, what? What do you mean feminism? Right? Let me tell you again what happened to me. I went to a conference about programming languages and people were shit. What do you mean feminism is going to solve my problem? This doesn't seem like it has anything to do with what I'm going through, ladies. But then they were very patient with me, very understanding, my very low understanding of what feminism was. They said, well, I mean, maybe, Felienne, if you think about feminism, what you think about is the feminism that's about individual liberties of women. So abortion rights, getting maternity leave, getting women into the university or into politics. And this is feminism. But this is a feminism called liberal feminism. And the idea of liberal feminism basically is the system is okay as it is. If we just pipeline more women in, then everything will be a-okay. Well, this doesn't seem like it will solve my problem. And they said, well, there's also a very different way of looking at the world. And that's feminist epistemology. And epistemology is the knowledge of knowledge. And they said, well, there's a lot of feminists who have thought about who gets to make knowledge. Like, who is creating knowledge? And how is knowledge created? And it seems like the problem that you are facing has something to do with what knowledge is being created and by whom is that knowledge created. I thought, oh yeah, maybe that does make some sense. And then I was reading in my research diary and I found this paper that I saw from 2016 called Glaciers, Gender and Science. Is anyone in the audience familiar with this paper? It sort of went viral on Twitter in 2016 because people were making fun of the paper, saying, oh, well, what does gender have to do with glaciology, the study of glaciers? And even now, I just saw a blog post of this year, of 2025, where people were still making fun of this paper for mixing gender and glaciology. But I remember having read the paper in 2016 and actually then thinking, oh, but this makes some good points. So I went back to this paper now with this new quest for I want to understand feminist epistemology, and I reread the paper and it was like mind-blowing. So what I learned from this paper, what I didn't know, is any of you a glaciologist? Once I gave this talk and there was one on the first row and he started to give us lots of detailed explanation of all the simplifications I was making, so happy that this is not going to happen today. Apparently, there are two different types of glaciers. I already didn't know this. There are glaciers that are very high in the mountains, but there's also glaciers that are in rural areas. It's like right next to where people live. And this guy in the first row was already, well, it's not really two categories, like 7 different, yes. But let's make this simplification of 2 different categories. Now you may vote, like as a society, as science, what type of glaciers do we have more information about? Is this A, easy to reach glaciers in rural areas because they're so easy to reach? So you would expect they would be oversampled. Who thinks easy to reach glaciers? Thank you for playing ball, that's very kind. Or category B, would this be glaciers very high in the mountain, very hard to get to? Who thinks category B? Why? That doesn't make sense. This is much harder. Why?
Because I think as soon as they found it, they were like be documenting the whole thing more than things that we see every day because it gets like normal.
Yes, exactly. Just because things you see them every day, they don't have that special value. So it is indeed this category, because what you can do if you climb a high mountain, you know what you can do next? Well, first you climb down the high mountain, and then you go to the pub, and you say, hey friends, you know what I did today? I climbed the high mountain, and it was so high, and it was so cold, oh, it was an adventure, right? So this is something that can give you social status, right? This is special. And then just collecting data in the village is too normal, right? You go to a village every day to collect data, and the villagers is like, hey Bob, are you at it again? It's like, yes, I'm just here collecting the data. It doesn't give you a story, right? It doesn't make you the hero of your own narrative. So I was looking at this, I thought, okay, so something very difficult is valued a lot, and then something that's very easy isn't valued at all. I think reading this paper told me more about the programming language community than being in the programming language community for like 2 decades. Because I'm like, this is us. This is us, right? The hard stuff, C++, Haskell, Coq, which is a proof assistant, the hard things is what gets you value. But doing things that are seen as easy, like spreadsheets or PHP or JavaScript, which everyone can do, that isn't special. So that's not a way to get social status. And then also seeing this, I realized why my research had always been hitting this resistance. Because what I've always been trying to do in my spreadsheet work, but also now in my work with Hedy, is I take something that is hard, like Python, and I make it easier by making it localized. And I had always thought that making something easier is inherently good. I didn't think there would be a way of thinking in which making something easier isn't adding value. Because this is just what I care about. I like programming. I want to give programming to more people. I want to make it easier. But if this is how you think, then making something easier is actually taking away value. You're making it less valuable by making it easier. For me, this doesn't make sense in my heart. But if you look at the research culture, I'm like, I understand now that you live in this, all of the programming people live in this different world in which hardness is a desired state. And making something easier is actually not good. And I thought, someone must have thought of this before. I cannot be the first person to think of feminism and programming languages, right? This is very unlikely. And luckily I found Ari Schlesinger, who ultimately became the second author of our paper just by Googling feminism and programming languages. And she wrote a blog post called Feminism and Programming Languages very long time ago, in the mid-2010s, when she was just an undergrad student. So she just wrote this blog post like, can we program in a feminist way, and what does feminist programming looks like? And it's very like, I think the blog post is very open-minded and just asking questions like, oh, I'm exploring feminist critique of logic. I just want to like see how this goes. And if this is something that other people are interested in, I would truly appreciate some feedback. And after this, like terrible shit happened. You're free to look it up on the internet. You're also free to not look up the internet, but it ended up with 4chan and Reddit and doxing. So it was not great. So after this, Ari was like, okay, I will never ever think of this topic again because this is just literally dangerous. So I reached out to her. I'm like, hey, you seem to know a lot about feminism and programming languages, but I also saw what happened to you on the internet. Would you be willing to think about this with me? And she was like, yeah, sure. So together we ended up writing a paper. And the idea of our paper is we took this framework from the glaciology paper and we just applied it step by step to the programming languages community, just by taking ideas from that paper and moving them over. So the rest of the talk mainly will be talking about what we got from the glaciers paper and what we found in programming languages. So this is a quote from the original paper. Natural sciences have historically been defined by, and their credibility built upon, manly attributes, right? The manly attributes, we were like, yeah, we see how that's true for programming as well. But the other part is interesting. The natural sciences, like physics, for example, have always been male, historically been defined by men. But then that's not true for computer science. There was a time, a long time ago, that all programmers were women. Like 100% of programmers were women. This is a Cosmopolitan magazine from the 1960s. And this is about how programming is a great career for girls and women. And there are some quotes in this paper, I will show them to you, that are like mind-blowing. For example, programming is just like planning a dinner. I actually think this is a great metaphor, right? Because you have to go shopping, you have to find all the ingredients, but then like someone is vegetarian and one person has to leave at 8 p.m. It's this whole plan that you have to hold in your brain, and then you go to the supermarket and oh no, they're out of lettuce, and they have to quickly make changes. I mean, I totally see how it's like planning a dinner. But then this is not a metaphor we would use today, right? Here's another one. Programming requires patience and an eye for detail. I think those things are still true. Women are naturals at computer programming. But see how this has entirely changed, how once this was seen as women's work, and now it's not. So if I say like, what is a programming language is a social construct, this too is social construction, right? So here in these days, apparently, programming was socially constructed as something that women were really good at. And then they've changed. How? Like, how does this change? And a lot of people have already thought of this question. How did programming become so male? And there's research that says that early computing was unusually open to women. Because in the 1960s, there were not yet computer science degrees. You couldn't say, oh, but you didn't study for this, because no one studied for this. And then over time, programming became masculine. And there were many different things contributing to that. But one of the things that happened is that programming was made mathematical. So the process of masculinizing went by mathematizing. So it went more and more mathematical. And the manly attributes there really, really played a role. So sadly for me, one of my fellow Dutch people is partly to blame for this. Have you heard of a guy called Edgar Dijkstra? Of Dijkstra's algorithm? So if I do this talk in my country, which I sometimes do, people get really angry for me. Someone said that I am defacing the legacy of Dijkstra, but mainly what I'm doing is literally reading his own words aloud. So let's see what Dijkstra has to say about programming. He says, I intend to present programming as a mathematical activity. And it's not so much interesting that he says this, but when he says this. He writes this in 1973. That's a long time into computing, right? This is 20 years after the first compiler. This is 30 years after the first computer. So what were we doing for 30 years? Apparently not math. Right? So there was this big amorph field, and this early programming, many people were involved from different backgrounds. Maybe people know Noam Chomsky, a linguist, or Herb Simon. He was a political scientist, and he's very famous because he won the Turing Award, but also a Nobel Prize for economy. Right? So you see how diverse the field is in background. And at one point, this field, some people, mainly mathematicians, were like, oh, this field, we would like to own this. Right? We would like to be the boss of computer science because it's well funded and it has prestige. And of course, not just Dijkstra, right, that's doing this. There was this whole body of movement. But it was interesting that he was saying, oh, I intend to make it mathematical. And it's also interesting to see what argument he used. So he writes, an inventive and effective mathematician will find challenge and bring his abilities to bear. So basically he's saying, come here to programming. We have high mountains to climb. So much challenge. Come here, right? Come mathematicians. Let's go on the high mountains. And then through this process of making it more mathematical, more men started to participate. The societal value of programming went up and then the number of women went down. So part of this quote can really be attributed to how it works in computer science, but part of it is also just really specific for us. This is another quote from the same paper. So this says, most research stems from information by men, about men, with manly characteristics and within a masculine discourse. So this is also very true for programming, sadly. Information by men, about men. Let's look at this, for example. This is the proceedings of the ACM on programming languages. This is a very special journal that only comes out like every 10 years if people feel like organizing it. And the most recent edition of this journal came out in 2020. And there are 46 authors that participated and only 4 were women. And those 4 together only wrote 2 papers. And 3 of them were on 1 paper, and 1 paper is authored by a single author that is female, and that's also the only one that talks about human characteristics of programming in any way. So, yeah, that's not great. Here's another example. This is a book called The Masterminds of Programming. I actually really like this book. It's used in quite some programming languages courses because it's interviews with programming language designers. So it gives a really nice background reading for how do you make a programming language. I don't know, what are the processes of decisions that are being made. And there's 27 people that are being interviewed, about 17 languages. Does anyone want to guess how many women were interviewed for the book?
0?
Yeah, 0. Yeah, all of the people were male, right? And it's from 2017, so quite recent also. And apparently no one made enough problems about this that also had enough power to do something about it. And not all the people that were interviewed, they could probably have said, well, if there's no women, then I'm not participating. But none of this happened. But what is also interesting, sadly you didn't all get to the first line, then you could have noticed with your own eyes, but let me point out to you what is so special about this. Is anyone seeing what is special? Like, look at the languages that are on the cover. What stands out there? Okay, I'll make it easier for you. Look at our friend. Look at our friend, not a programming language, UML there. Like suddenly we're like, oh, UML is a programming language. And why? I understand why. Because the person that created, one of the people that created UML, Grady Booch, is just a very interesting guy. And he's also a great guy, right? He's actually very much a feminist and an anti-racist. Like, he's a fantastic guy. But it's interesting that suddenly we're like, oh, let's move the goalpost to include UML so that we can have Grady in our book. And they didn't also think, maybe we can have other people in the book. Or even further, this is really just about conversations with the creators of the major programming languages. Why is it important to talk with creators of languages? They could have also talked with users or testers, right? It doesn't even have to be about people. But this is, again, this heroic story of there's one person or 2 or 3 that made a programming language, and then what people do with it. We don't care about that. We care about building, about climbing the mountains and building the languages. So yeah, we have this information by men, about men as well. There's this, I wrote about this in I have a newsletter. I wrote about this last week in my newsletter, how there was a book from the 1980s that was saying, oh, you know, there has never been any great women programmer. In the 1980s, they were saying this, like Grace Hopper, Margaret Hamilton, but just like erased from history, saying, oh, we've never seen a good female programmer. Like, we don't know why they don't show up here. And then we do this with manly characteristics within a manly, masculine discourse. And this is about what we value, right? What do we study if we study programming languages? You could say, and I don't think that's a weird definition, that a programming language is an interface between people and computers. But what people study in programming languages, but also in software engineering and generally in computer science, is we study the computer part. So we're doing benchmarking, we're measuring how quick is the language, we're proving that a programming language has certain properties, we're building the programming languages. But we're much less observing how people are using the programming languages, or interviewing people, or asking them, hey, what do you like about this programming language? And they're like, why, right? Why don't we have people in our field that like asking these questions about how do people deal with it? It's like, yeah, I have another Dijkstra quote. This guy, he's always on the scene of the crime, really. It's very fun that he was really an internet troll before the internet existed. He wrote, literally, you can look this up, he wrote this like blog post by handwriting on paper, and then he would snail mail them to his enemies. Like he would just look up where people that disagreed with him, where they were working in the university, and I would just mail them, and then all of these, they're called EWDs, you go and read them on the internet. Very fun. Like he said that the head of Philips was a backstabbing piece of snot. I mean, he was a great guy. He also said, by claiming that they can contribute to software engineering, social scientists make themselves even more ridiculous. And the next sentence is, but not less dangerous. So the people that could have done the inquiry of, you know, why do people like programming languages? They've just been bullied out of the field, not just by Dijkstra, even though I think he was very excited about it, but also by other people, that we have decided programming is about science. The next quote of this part is, he says, the construction of software requires cruelly hard science. And I'm, of course, not even saying that's not true, but I think it also requires looking at people. And you can just see that by the papers that are presented. So here are just a few titles of papers that were presented at the Splash, where I was also presenting this paper. So there's a paper called A Type System for High Assurance Verification of Rust Programs. Oh, fine, that's probably a good thing. Or Static Information Flow Control in Rust, right? This is things that we need to do, like type checking and static verification. Good, I like that those things exist. But what doesn't exist is, I would want to know, why do people love Rust? Are there any people in the audience that like Rust or use Rust? Yes. So apparently people go bananas for Rust. They're like, oh, we love Rust, and they have Rust t-shirts. They call themselves Rustations, and they have little crab stickers that they bring everywhere. But this seems a very fun group of people. I want to understand, like, why do people like Rust, right? Rust is supposed to be some sort of newer, better version of C++. I don't see many people with t-shirts like, oh, I love C++, it's like my favorite thing. People don't really seem to like C++, but they really seem to like Rust. Like, why? Right? I would love to interview people and ask them, why do you love a programming language so much, and then this programming language? Or I would like to look at people using statically typed languages, because I think all of you, if you have ever programmed in a static language like C or Java, sometimes this compiler is saying, no, this is not a match, these types are incorrect, and then you're like, no, I know this is correct, that you stupid type checker, you are wrong and I'm right. So I would love to like sit in people's offices, and then if they're shouting at the compiler, I say, tell me more about this. Like, what is the compiler doing to you? Where is it touching you in inappropriate ways? I would love to do such a study, right? Just observe people using a thing. But it's almost impossible to publish this type of work in the programming languages community, because it's about people. We are not really educated in doing interviews or doing observation studies, so not a lot of people know how to do it. And then if you want to talk about it, you would have to submit it to a programming languages conference where people don't know how to evaluate these type of studies. They would say something like, oh, you just have 10 participants. Yeah, it's a qualitative study, right? It's not meant to be statistically significant. So you just cannot do this type of research. But you also can't really do it elsewhere, right? I mean, you could say, it's okay that programming languages doesn't do this because we have other communities. But then if you want to submit, for example, your research to conferences on human-computer interaction, that they do look at how people interact with computers, then you would have to do a lot of work explaining what is Rust, what is a type system, like what is the situations in which people would battle a compiler, because those people wouldn't necessarily know about how to build compilers and how that works. So maybe they would accept it, but they wouldn't really like fully understand. And also, if you just publish it in a human-computer interaction venue, then it's very unlikely to have impact on the design of programming languages, which probably is ultimately what you want. Okay, this is just a few slides I put in for reviewer 2. So now you also have to deal with this. Reviewer 2 said, yes, Felienne, but what? No, he didn't say Felienne because he didn't know who was sending the paper. Yes, author. But once, 10 years ago, there was one paper in Splash that was about socio-technical aspects. It was principles for programming language adoption. Why don't you talk about this? And it was 2012, even not even 2016. And the fun thing is, it was awarded most influential paper 10 years later. So I actually went and interviewed this guy. I was like, hey, why aren't you still in the programming language community? Because you had this very impactful paper once. And then he said literally the same thing as I was just saying. It's like, you can't make a career out of this. Because if you want to make a career in programming languages, every year you have to publish a top paper. And you cannot do this, maybe you can do it once, but certainly you can build a career on something that's so on the fringes of the field. So then he started a startup and he never looked back. So far, we've really looked at why is computing the way it is. But the feminism paper, the Glaciers paper, also looks at what happens in the future. How do those systems of power remain in play? And they're saying that it's very, very hard to make change in a community because community is the way it is. And then people that are like that, they will stay and other people will leave. So they say, for example, that discussions perpetuate power dynamics. I'm like, yeah, that is true. This happens for me as well. At the personal level, like you go to a conference and like, oh, I interviewed a bunch of people, and then people say, oh, but interviewing is not computer science. Or they will say, what is qualitative work? What does that mean? Like, if this is the level, then it's very energy consuming to go to a conference because every time you have to explain like what the basics of your work is. But there's also like structural power dynamics. And if you talk about, in general, about structural power dynamics, this might be about like laws and regulations that prevent you from making certain changes. And then, of course, we don't really have laws, but we do have written rules. So I looked up the 2 top programming languages conferences and what they have in their call for papers. So this is POPL, and they say, they advise the program committee, so the reviewers of the people of the program, to look at whether an approach is fundamentally sound. And this is something, if you do a qualitative work, then you can't really be fundamentally sound. Like, that's just not a property that that type of research is going to have. So you see, it doesn't fit the mold that we have created. And they also say that a paper should contain sufficient information for others to reproduce. But if you do an observation study or a diary study, then the reproducing isn't the goal, right? It's good that we have reproducible science, but not all science can be reproducible. Certainly this feminism paper that was basically, hey, I observed you all for 20 years and this is what I saw, can't really be reproduced very easily by someone else. And I looked at the other conference, this is PLBI, and they have also a number of reviewing guidelines. One of them is appropriate and clear experimental design and relevant metrics. That doesn't fit my work. And then they have a FAQ, right? It's like they are trolling me. They have this list of frequently asked questions. And one of the frequently asked questions on the list is this. Read it along with me. But what about human factors or other areas that might require empirical evaluation? I'm like, oh, I would very much like to know what about human factors. Yes, what about that? PLDI? Oh, yes, PL research sometimes involves user studies, but they are currently relatively infrequent in the papers we examined. It's like you put gentleman's club on the door and you're like, we don't get any ladies in here. We don't know why. It's a mystery why they are not here. And then, of course you have relatively infrequent papers in that category because you haven't included it in the categories. Like, it's not like you don't get the paper so you don't include it in the categories. It's like if you put it in the categories, then people will submit. Sometimes I'm like, am I crazy? Am I just like the only person that is crazy? It's a bit sad. One time I was giving this talk and then someone at the end in the Q&A was like, well, Felienne, but how did you survive this? I'm like, do I seem fine? have you seen me? Anyway, so these discussions, they just keep the same power systems alive. And the only way to really change this is you have to sort of get to the top. You have to not only get papers accepted, but you have to get papers accepted for maybe 10 years. And then maybe you're invited into a steering committee. And then maybe you're still the only one in the steering committee that cares about people. And then you say, maybe can we add one rule to this list of categories? But then of course it's very, very hard to get there without, being like me, sad and bitter. So then I did all this work and I presented the paper. It was actually accepted at Splash the year after. That was a lot of fun. So I went back into like the cave of the lion to present it. And then of course people were like, well, Felienne, you did all this work. Now what? Now, what should we do? We're ready to fight. I'm like, I don't know, right? My goal wasn't necessarily to make change in this community. Remember, my goal was to understand my feelings and to convince myself I'm not crazy, but I don't that. I understand the feelings. I think I'm not so crazy. So sort of my problem is solved. I don't know how to fix this. It's just doing this gave me other feelings that maybe now I want to understand. That when I was doing all this work, and this is now also what my new research is focusing on, when I was reading all these papers in preparation of writing this, there is so much work, so much research already on women and computer science, and that I had never heard of. And reading it, I felt so seen. There's this one paper I quoted in my paper that says, women can be coders or female, but not both. And this came from an interview study, right? So this isn't men describing women. This is women describing their own experience. Women that are programmers are being interviewed about like how they live their life. And then they are saying this, like they're saying, I don't wear dresses, I don't wear earrings, I try to just be a boy with a hoodie and the jeans. I try to just fit in, just do my programming and hope no one will bring up gender, right? I'm like, this is how I feel, or at least this is how I felt when I was younger. I thought, oh, if I just work really hard and don't talk about feminism or sexism, then everything will be fine. And then I read this quote, and it's so beautiful. Like, you think your pain is unique, and then you read by James Baldwin. And this is how I was feeling when I was reading all this work. It's like, oh, there's so many other people like me. But on the other hand, also I got sad because I thought, why do I have to do this work? Nothing uniquely qualifies me for doing gender and feminism and programming language design, right? I don't want to do this. I just wanted to build my programming language in Arabic. That's what I wanted to do. And you all got me derailed on this story about having to explain why you are all not nice to me. So first you're already marginalizing me. Well, first because I'm female and then because of the type of work I try to do. And then also I have to do the extra work of explaining to you why this is so problematic. It wasn't really fun. And then if we do talk about changing the community, right? And very often we talk about getting more women into computing. If you go to a programming languages conference, they have maybe a dinner for female researchers, or some computer science programs have like groups for female students. And those things are good, right? It's important that we have them. But if we're just pipelining more women into a system that inherently has values that aren't theirs, stuff isn't going to get better. Because what will happen, and I've seen this happen, is that some people just drop out. They're like, this world doesn't want the things I want, so I will just do other things in other subfields. Like I was almost in the programming education subfield, and I could have stayed there. You know, and I would have been also happy, maybe mentally more healthy, who knows. So just so many women drop out. They go do other stuff because it doesn't align with their values. And a lot of other people that stay in, you have to start believing the same values. Either because it's just, I mean, women can have those values, right? Women might like climbing mountains just as much as men do. So some people just might fit in the value system, or some people might just think, if I want to be here, this is the value system I have to have, either explicitly or just implicitly, right? You just sort of observe what is happening around you. So I think we should stop focusing so much on just getting more women in, because then ultimately they will either drop out or burn out. That's not helpful. We have to talk about what is this value system, and is this the value system that's also my value system? And this is all maybe a bit abstract, or maybe like it was a little bit abstract until, well, one moment was January of this year, when it was Trump's inauguration. And all the heads of the software companies in America were like literally behind Trump, like physically behind him, and of course also in spirit. And then a lot of people were like, oh, so maybe Silicon Valley and like big tech, their value system isn't my value system. It's like, yeah, I was already there. But it remains really, really hard. And this is really like an uphill battle that a few years ago, I was like, oh, before I retire, I can do this and this and this and this. And now I'm like, this will not be fixed before I retire. Like, maybe we'll never win, but we have to keep trying. And not so long while ago, in May 2025, so of this year, there was an article in New York Times that was also sort of going mildly viral. And it's just like so super painful. So the title of the piece, and this is by a professor of computer science, is I teach computer science, and that's all. So this person is saying in New York Times that all politics, like everything that isn't computer science, should just not be in computer science. And just what he means is, I don't want to talk about difficult things, like difficult things in the meaning of human things. And then in the piece also he's saying, I teach my students about how computer systems work, and none of that is political. Like, none of how computer systems work is political. I'm like, okay, so just to show you what I mean, this is Python. I'm sure you know Python. And I'm doing something very easy in Python. I'm adding 2 and 9. And this leads to 11. This is very good. This is working. But maybe you remember from all the way in the beginning of the talk how I was talking about how hard it was to build an Arabic programming language. Because among other differences, Arabic uses different numerals. They don't use this for 2 and this for 9, which is was very surprising to me when I realized, because we call those things Arabic numerals. Yes, yeah, a person that actually has Arabic as a native language asked me, like, can we also do Arabic numerals? I'm like, what do you mean Arabic numerals? He's like, well, that's not what we use. Like, what? Are you sure? Like, me white-splaining to him what his numbers look like. Like, do you know this? Yeah. Well, he did know this. And so this is actually Arabic numerals. So this is Ethnin and this is Tissa. This is 2 and 9. And then you would think this would just work in Python, right? Oh, let's take a little vote. Who thinks, of course, this will just work, because they're numbers, and the creators of Python have of course, implemented everyone's numerical systems. Yes, who thinks, yes, sure, this will work? So happy a few people are playing ball. No, of course, it doesn't work at all. And look what it says. It doesn't just say beep, beep, right? It says syntax error, invalid character. Oh, the thing that you're using. There's 300 million of you Arabic speakers. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're invalid, right? Whatever you are using, it's invalid. Right? And I'm like, how can you say teaching people about programming isn't political? This is the lowest of bars, right? It would be 5 minutes to fix this in major programming languages, because this will certainly not create a crash in your compiler because you do not know about those characters. So certainly you're not using them for something else, right? They're somewhere in the Unicode table that you have never been, so there will not be any issues. And this is not just a mistake, like there's this British philosopher, she's called Miranda Fricker, and she says that this is an injustice, an injustice of the epistemic sort, where knowledge is not created by everyone, but just by a few people. Like, and if that's not your definition for politics, I don't know what is. And of course, not all programming languages are like this. Well, almost all of them, C, C++, Java, SQL, all of them crash on Arabic numerals, but not Hadi, of course. Hadi does great, so you can just add 2 and 9, and then this works, and this just creates 11 in Arabic. This is a for loop, this also works, so you can just go, you're like going from 1 to 0, this is not 0, no, this is 5, this is Hamza, this is 5. I have learned many things about Arabic now. So then it just goes 1 to 5. And then if I show this to people that do speak Arabic as a first language, sometimes they're like, wow, like I had never ever imagined seeing a for loop in my own language. And then one part of my heart is like grateful that I can make this for people, but sort of the other part of my heart is like, why are everyone's expectations so low, right? This, like making this in Arabic, it took me 6 months, and I'm not even a professional programmer, right? I'm an academic whose side hobby just accidentally turned into a big project. If Python or C or any of the languages, if they would want this, it wouldn't be hard to do. So then the only conclusion you can sort of draw is that they don't want this. And if I talk about Hadi in Arabic or in other languages, then very often people say, why can't they just learn English? I'm like, who is they? I am they, right? My native language isn't even English. Who is they? And all of this is politics. So this idea that programming is just this safe bubble where we're only talking about computers and all the human stuff can be pushed out, it's insane. Anyway, if you're like, so that was super fun, I would love to read 20 pages of that rant. This is possible, open access, you can get it from the ACM. And also I will be here around for today and maybe a bit of tomorrow as well. So if you want to chat a bit more, then that's also possible. The end.
I think we still have time for a few questions.
Yeah. I'm here all night, so I'm not going home. Oh, there's one here.
Thank you, very inspiring. Did you also find that the language also had implication for the concepts as you were moving over? It's not just the characters that you change, but there's different ways how you express
Absolutely.
concepts.
Yes. So in one other version of this talk, I talk a bit more about that, how there's a lot of concepts in Arabic and other natural languages that aren't in English. So they also cannot be expressed. Just to give you one example, Arabic has a character called tatwil, which is a little bit like an underscore, and you can use it to lengthen characters. So you can make a keyword, for example, cool is print, so you can make it very long. And this is something that's used in Arabic poetry to make like things align very nicely. And we support that in Hadi as well, and that means you can lay out your code by lengthening your keywords. And that is, you can really beautify your code, and that's actually a concept. It's like, I would like to have this in Python as well. I would like to have print, right? So that everything is nicely aligned, like it makes just this beautiful view. So that's just one concept. Also Arabic and other languages as well have gender. So sometimes the keywords have to change based on the gender of a variable. So then we have, in many different situations, we allow for multiple keywords. So just the male and the female form. This is also something that English doesn't have. And that makes the code well, just a bit more, well, it gives it maybe a little bit more spice, but also which reads more natural. And word order is another one. I think this is also true in German, but at least it's true in Dutch, that for an if statement, we don't say if x is 5. We say if x 5 is. Same in German, yes. So already the structure of is and then x and then an equal sign, like we would write it in a different order if we would do it truly German or Dutch. So then also it just feels different. This is something we don't support, that word order, because no, then the parser would go bananas. But there's all these things that there's so much of the structure of the language, of programming languages that's tied to English, that if you would separate this, then you would get very different programming language. And this is also, by the way, some people in the Arabic-speaking community like aren't fans of what we do with Hadi necessarily, which I absolutely understand, because they're saying this is just Python with some Arabic glaze, right? It isn't at its core. We would design it very differently, and then you get into the problem. Again, it's like politics all the way down. The way parser frameworks work are also entirely ready for English language programming languages. So if you would want to build an Arabic programming language from the start, then probably you'd have to throw away everything there already is in parser frameworks. We look at my source code, it's on GitHub. You will see we have all these hacks, like to hack around. We have a preprocessor for the grammars so that we generate grammars that the parser framework can handle, because they wouldn't really allow for many concepts. So the level of knowledge that you would need to have to make an Arabic programming language from the start is insane, and therefore it's very unlikely that we get such a language. And this is also true for many other languages. There's this very cool experimental Chinese language called Wenyang language. Of course, we talk about this in the paper as well. And in the blog post that is describing this language, this Chinese creator is also like, what I also would have wanted to do is this and this and this, but it's just impossible. Like having code that goes this way, right? Instead of this way. Like, find an editor that can handle this. So it's like, okay, we will do it like this, right? So that's all these things. It's super hard.
I wonder if you also got so far with the research to see if teams that speak different languages can work together in one program. Does it get translated, or how does it look like? If, for example, I would
Yes.
continue the work of someone, for example, who is Arabic and would have worked in this Arabic system, could I translate it so I can...
Yeah, so we haven't really looked at how teams use it, because Hadi is mainly used for education and that's usually one language. But we do offer translation support. So you can write in Arabic, and then if the program parses, I can translate it to Dutch, because it's just parsing and then pretty printing with Dutch keywords. And we even have this connection where we try to do best estimates variable names with an LLM. That's actually a really nice use for an LLM. We take a few words and we translate them with like Google Translate API, so that you have a view of the program. This is of course not perfect, right? Then you might lose a lot in the automatic translations of the keywords, but then at least you can look at the code in your own native language, and the keywords is easy. So if this would be used in software engineering, then it would be interesting to see how it goes. And it's always, of course, a bit of a trade-off. So sometimes people say, oh, but then some people program in Spanish, right? And other people program in French, and they can't understand each other. Yes, but now they can even participate. So it's like the one problem you exchange for the other problem, and it's very much a question of values, what you think is the worst of those problems. So of course this would create a world in which some people would make stuff in languages that other people will not understand.
And I wanted to thank you for your talk. That was really amazing. Thank you so much for your work.
Thanks.
Yes, so thank you too. You are really kind of like making my epistemic assumptions go wild. And I have oftentimes felt like doing the hard stuff as a teacher, as an emancipatory act. So kind of like what I do, like it's really fresh for me. Like I introduce students to the command line, and I wonder, should I do this? Because there is this other layer where you just don't need that command line, and it's similar for this question, this general question, why do we do in a computer science education program, why don't we do visual programming languages? Why do we do text-based languages at all, and not something like, you know, like PD, which is complicated as well, but or other languages that work visually? And so I must admit, I'm not sure how to formulate a question out of it, but it's kind of like this is kind of like turning upside down my mind now. So I feel like I have this high mountain thing going strong by saying, oh, I want to understand like the inner workings of the system, and epistemically I think you should be aware of what's kind of like Laura and me, we recently just quoted Frida Nake, who is this German pioneer in computer art, who speaks about the surface and then the subface, and I would have argued for being an emancipatory computer user, you have to dive into the subface, which is code. But then I wonder whether that's just, I'm trapped in the high mountain.
Yeah, so I think this is a very, very interesting question. And I do think this question, why don't we teach visual languages, is like, this is why. And it is, I think, mostly a matter of order, right? I don't think computer scientists shouldn't ever see the command line, right? Or shouldn't learn how memory management works. But I think a lot of people now assume, oh, we have to do, in my programming where I teach, we teach C++ as the first language. I've tried to change this, but I have failed. Because they say, but students need to know about memory management. Like, I'm not fighting that. But if this is the first thing they do, then we are losing out on people. We are losing out on women because women are much less likely to have prior knowledge of computing, just because their dads don't refer them to programming clubs, right? That's reality. And their teachers will not say, oh, pick a programming course. So people without prior knowledge, women, also families of lower socioeconomic status that don't have computers in the house, you are losing them. But also, you're losing people that care about making stuff that has a meaning to them. Like all of these first-year programming language courses, they're always not just hard, but also divorced from reality, right? Like, here's a fun programming exercise, print 100 prime numbers. Oh, you know what would be super cool? Like, we have a text file, and you have to find the longest alphabetically ordered substring. Are you sufficiently excited now about this, right? So we're teaching people, like we're doing it all alone. It's never in a group. It never has anything to do with reality. So the people we keep in the fields, like they don't necessarily care about reality. And then we do this in an order that reinforces and filters that type of behavior. And then the fun thing is I'm writing a paper about a concept that I am describing as repair courses. So first we do this damage, and then we have to repair it. So then in the second year or the third year, we have a group project, because collaboration is important, students. And then the students, they're already destroyed, right? They have mental damage from all the stuff we've done to them. And then if you're teaching this course, I know some people are laughing because they are teaching those courses, and you say, oh, you know what's very important? Collaboration. And the students are like, what? Why? Right? Because first we tell them, work alone outside of reality. And we're like, oh, software testing is really important. You have to do software testing. Like, why? You can just write a specification. Why should I ask a person how this works? Because I just made it, I proved it with Coq that this is working, that my invariants are clear, right? So I'm not saying we shouldn't teach these things, but I think if we're interested in having a different population, many computer science programs say that they're interested in this, then I think the order has to change. That my dream first-year programming course would be run around on campus with a notebook, ask people what kind of software they would like, and then you build that software. You make paper prototypes, and I don't care, use an LLM. I don't fucking care. What I want is that you make something that has value to you. And it's not about learning programming. It's about learning, oh, I can make something that has an impact on people, right? And then also a nice side effect will be we are empowering people to make their own apps instead of taking them from the app store. This is also wicked. Like, quick question. You're all computer science people. Who of you is like using apps regularly on their phone or their computer that they have created themselves? You see how this is a problem, right? Like, why are you not creating stuff? Why? Because big tech has us captive, because you can't put stuff on your iPhone, because it's too hard to build things. So I would say this, in my dream world, which sadly I know I will never live in, I've given up, but my dream world, this would be first year programming. And then we're like, oh, look, all the LLM stuff that you've been exposed to. Like, this is the concepts in there. And then you can still do the command line and you can still do the difficult stuff. But I think that's a way to keep people in that care about making stuff for other people. And then maybe some people that do not care about this, they will go do other stuff, like math or physics, I don't know. But then they will be in other fields where they can do less damage to society, right? Anyway, other questions?
I'm not sure about less damage. So I study meteorology and not computer sciences at all. So that's physics of the atmosphere. And meteorology has the 50-50 men-women gender quotient. Physics, 5% maybe a bit more, but not much. And I think it's the same thing, because different people start studying meteorology because it makes sense to feel that influence, saying that it's very absolutely neutral and apolitical and removed from all things human. It's just about particles and whatnot. And it's not true. There is a video essay by a young astrophysicist, and she discussed so, any more questions?
Oh, one more. I'll try to be brief.
Okay, so I was actually, like, last year I was in Amsterdam to check out some study program. It was called Computational Social Science. And I was wondering whether or not these questions could fit inside this field and how people inside computational social science are like doing things together with people like you, because it seems to me like it's also like a field where these two words come together.
This is a great question. So a more generalized version of that question is, should this work be in computer science, and if so, why, right? And the sad thing also, which I found when I was doing my paper, is that there's so much good stuff already, right, in computational social science and in the humanities. The problem is, because of the way the world is organized currently, it's like in the hierarchy of sciences, maybe math and physics are at the top, and then there's computer science, and then there's other things, right? You see this also just in how funding works, that computer science gets much more funding than other fields. So in that social structure that we currently have, it's very unlikely for information to flow up the hierarchy. Because a computer scientist is not going to read stuff from the humanities. What do they know, right? So in principle, yes, there are so many fantastic people working in science and technology studies and ethnography and history of science doing computer-related stuff. But I had never heard of this. And if it's not in computer science, it's also not in the computer science curricula, because we teach what faculty we have. So if we only have computer science faculty, then all that knowledge that does exist, right? It's not that the knowledge isn't there, it doesn't reach us. For those two reasons, it's like socially constructed as never getting in. So to a certain extent, sadly, it's like if a tree falls in the humanities, do the computer scientists hear it? And you know the answer.
So maybe.
Okay. I think there's like, I totally resonate with what you're talking about, but I come from the kind of like the other side, like humanities and design, and then kind of into fields of computer science. I think that And it was even interesting for me to see it historically, because at the same time that Dijkstra went on his trawling journey, there was a small group of computer scientists in Norway and Scandinavia who developed with the unions at that time things that later became named participatory design. And they even developed description languages to make this happen. So I think there's like a parallel story.
Yes.
And there's this small group of participatory design, which is like an ACM, a subcategory of interaction design. And I think there are people, and I even just saw that, that are like interested in that.
Yes.
I think your work fits perfectly.
Yes.
It's just like, and this is also my experience, it's a very small group.
Yes.
And a very small group in this huge kind of like ACM world.
And also, probably they don't have that much power. And it's not even about size necessarily, because CHI, this is the Human-Computer Interaction Conference, it's the biggest and also the oldest of the 6 subgroups. So even if you're really big and you're with many people, like the CHI community is, still it is seen as less prestigious. And there's even within computer science, I talk about this in my paper as well, there's a very clear hierarchy between the subfields. And so computer systems and programming languages are higher hierarchy than software engineering and CHI is. So there too you have this, it's unlikely to go upstream. So sometimes the communities are small or they might be big, but the type of work they do is seen as not true computer science. As soon as you're outside of this super narrow disciplinary boundary of computer science, and then you're much more likely to be on the boundary if you're female, or maybe if you have a disability, because then you're interested in studying how that relates to computing, then it's like, this is not real computer science.
Yeah, but I mean, this is more, for me, this is more a question of kind of like the politics of
100%, yes, yeah. This is.
I mean, everything.
The injustice of epistemology is not just about programming languages, but also about how computer science is constructed and who gets to participate and decide. Currently now, you will only reach, I don't know, the board of ACM, for example, if you're seen as a computer scientist, and you're only seen as a computer scientist if you do the computer sciencey stuff. So everyone that ever reaches this level of power, has to a certain extent, is wearing the hard cap. Or pretending to, and then quickly throws it off once they reach power. That's very soul draining.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that because
Me neither.
I think it's really like hard to break that, but I think it's kind of like the only way I think we will somehow at least have a chance in the predicaments we're in. Because I mean, this is kind of like if we don't break this silence of science, then we will not have any chance in solving the problems that we created. So I think it's really worth.
I mean, it is of course what I'm trying, but it's very hard because it requires systemic change, which is always hard.
Yeah, I think the point is like we can spend a lot of our energy in trying to break the existing silos and kind of like blocks. But then I think we need much more people like you thinking between them. So it's kind of like more like how do we find people that are in the between?
And luckily also I've been finding that the work I've been doing is resonating with many people, including people that are in the higher echelons of computer science, maybe because I am a computer scientist. And it's very hard to say that what I'm doing with Hedy is like building a programming language isn't really computer science. I mean, people try, but it doesn't really have much weight behind it. So it is maybe somewhat helpful to spread this message, and then somehow it might also reach people higher. But as I said in my slides, right, now what? I don't know.
One more question that is also kind of troubling me recently, and you mentioned this, that first it seems that you could just use LLMs. I wonder whether, and I mean I'm observing the discussions around LLM kind of like on social media and what programmers say on that, and there's of course like a huge wave of people like dismissing vibe coding and saying this only creates crap and non-qualitative software, and then on the other hand I think LLMs might be, large language models might be the way to make computer programming more easy, and what I would just like your opinion on that, if that is something one should really invest into, and then in the same time there's this emancipatory question, because I don't want to be dependent on some big tech company in the US for being able to program. So that's
so then the first part of the question is, do we want to use LLMs, and do we want to use this LLMs that we have now, right? I think in order for me to agree with the standing, just use LLMs, you have to park for a little while the environmental impact, right? And the fact that all those companies are run by techno-fascists, those things have to be parked, that a lot of the data is stolen from people that didn't really give permission to what it's used for now. So imagine we can park these things, and I'm very willing to say some people do not want to park these things. I get it, right? I don't like to park these things. But if we do that for a little while, and we imagine that we have an LLM, you trained it on your own data that you didn't steal, you power it by solar power, right? And then I assume you're not a fascist, then okay, you have an LLM that doesn't have those properties. I think LLMs really work well for programming education, but it depends on what your goal is, right? If your goal is to teach them about programming, then it's not a really good idea. Then I'm hearing you're experimenting with flashcards. This is a much better way to teach programming. Also, it doesn't have any environmental impact if you do it on recycled paper. And you don't have to engage with fascism and theft, so that's good. I think this is a really great way to teach, right? Because this builds prior knowledge. But if the goal of a programming course is to show what programming can do, then I think LLMs can really work. Because showing as a first programming course, as I said, what programming can do is square numbers by making a function that takes two numbers, and then you cannot use 2 stars for squaring. No, you have to multiply the numbers, pretend that this doesn't exist, right? Oh, let's go implement sort. Oh, do you mean import Tim sorts? No, not like that. No, you have to implement your own sorting algorithm. If a goal of a programming course is also to teach what programming is for, we are doing a shit job. And I think there an LLM can actually help, because it's so super motivating, right? I do sometimes use vibe coding. It is awesome. I'm like, oh, I would like to have an app that does this. I have this very, very big notebook in a PDF, and I wanted to just get a random page. That's fun, like you get to go through your diary, like, make me an app that does this, and then it just does it. This is so cool. I'm like, oh, I feel like a superpower user. And I can do this by myself, but still it's like, oh, this is cool. So in that way, if the goal of a first programming course is to show students, these are the million things that you can do with programming. Your only limitation is your imagination. And then that is actually true if you use vibe coding. And also, it doesn't matter if it's shit, because they're going to throw it away. The only goal is just to show them, oh, do you want an app for, with my 17-year-olds in school, they're making their own app, and one of them is like, I want to make an app and it's going to track my beauty routine, and I can share my beauty routine with all my friends. I'm like, if this is what gets you excited about programming, yes, do it. And do it with Claude. I don't care, and you have your own app. And then she's showing all her friends, like, look, I put all my mascaras in there. Yes, right? If that's your goal, do it with LLMs. But if your goal is to teach them about programming concepts, no, of course not, right? You're not teaching people Chinese by saying, just go on DeepL, right? Type your German, and then Chinese comes out, and then if you do this long enough, then you will know Chinese. No, not for that goal.
Almost works. Then I would like to thank you again. I think this will be about what to research, what we actually done, and I think it may be we need to have this discourse. So yes, thanks again. We'll just mingle around. Yes, yeah.